Hello everybody, today I'm going to be reviewing The Matrix. This film came out in 1999 and it was written and directed by the Wachowskis. And of course everybody has seen this movie. It's a movie that defined a generation of kind of action, adventure, sci-fi filmmakers, at least kind of in terms of aesthetics. It changed the way movies were made. I mean, big blockbuster films, you know, in terms of action sequences, slow-mo, etc. And I know that I don't usually review kind of action movies and things like that, so this might seem a bit unexpected, but I love this movie and I will defend it to my grave. It really did capture the essence of a cyber generation, particularly at the end of the 20th century, and of course leading into the 21st century, what we would become. And I think that it handles this in ways that are very clever, somewhat unusual, incorporating a lot of kind of philosophical, biblical, dare I say, psychedelic themes. But it's not avant-garde, it's not experimental by any means. It really maintains that kind of mainstream appeal of a sci-fi action-adventure film, which it is. Here the Wachowskis are using a plethora of different influences and a combination that was kind of something that was a little bit unexpected. You know, we hadn't seen that in Hollywood that much, or at least that had resonated with the public. They were very inspired by all kinds of different things, like Hong Kong cinema, and, you know, mixing that cyberpunk style with, of course, a huge anime influence. Ghost in the Shell was the main influence for The Matrix. It really shows that the Wachowskis really had a passion for that film, which is, of course, is kind of like an anime classic. And they really have an understanding of how all of these influences kind of work together, and they've learned to kind of blend them harmoniously. And this movie really is like an anime film, except it's live action. Really, there's nothing that exciting or new about the film in terms of plot and in terms of structure, but it's kind of like a retelling of Wizard of Oz or Alice in Wonderland, but just for the digital age. And of course, Wizard of Oz, and particularly Alice in Wonderland, is referenced over and over in this film. The Dorothy or the Alice kind of protagonist in this scenario is Thomas Anderson, who is played by the Laurence Olivier of his generation, Mr. Keanu Reeves. He plays just an average guy who has a job as a computer programmer. By night, he is actually a computer hacker that goes by the alias Neo. He is like many of us and many a protagonist in a typical story where he feels like he doesn't fit in, like there's something wrong with the world. He wants to know what the meaning of life is. Why is he here? Is life real, or is it all an illusion? And many of these thoughts kind of come to fruition when he meets the legendary computer hacker, who is Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne. Morpheus awakens Neo, literally and figuratively, by showing him the truth about the world. That yes, he is living in an illusion, and that illusion is called the Matrix. The Matrix is a computer-generated world run by machines, and it's Neo's duty to help begin the revolution, to wake everyone up that's living in this faux society, to take control of themselves once again, and to live in reality, live with the truth, rather than this kind of American dream fantasy, to make the distinction between the material and the immaterial. And again, conceptually, I think this is really a clever concept. The plot itself we've seen a million times, but it's certainly relatable in the same ways that, like, you know, Dorothy in Wizard of Oz was, or Alice was in Alice in Wonderland. Each person who watches a movie, of course, is going to, you know, project their own experiences onto it, and they're going to come away from it maybe differently than another person. Like for me, I mentioned a few videos back that I had the DMT experience. If you don't know what that is, look it up, or I'll just, you know, link the video in the description box below. And of course, after that experience, I was obviously in complete emotional and physical shock, and I was for months and months on end. But obviously right after, I was just like, I couldn't believe that I was in reality again. So what did I do? I went to a bar and got really drunk, and what was playing on the TV screen above? It was The Matrix. And of course, to me, I'm sitting there just like, it's a metaphor, it's like a symbol. And I just look at the film differently because of that. Like, you know, the famous scene where Morpheus is offering the red pill or the blue pill. I mean, that is quite a blatant drug reference already. But he's offering him the chance to be awakened in order to kind of get out of the society that he's been shaped by and brainwashed by, to see the world for what it really is. And that can be very jarring and very heavy. I feel like in many ways the same thing happened to me. For me, the red pill is DMT, and I was unplugged from then on. And that is a huge responsibility for yourself and also to others. Hopefully you can kind of share what you know and spread that knowledge and spread more love and kindness to other people. Help people who do not have that insight, because a lot of people don't. And I think that this film captures that idea well, because once the curtain is lifted for these characters and they see the world for what it really is, they can finally re-enter the Matrix with all of this new knowledge that other people in the Matrix still do not have. They know that the Matrix is an illusion, and that the idea of this illusion is to keep people in line with the establishment, constantly kind of feeding the system like a giant corporation. So now they can hack the system, they can break the rules in that digital world because they have this new insight and truth. And once you understand that this is a system and that this is an illusion built around, just a concept, a fantasy, an idea that really just comes from fear of the unknown, you realize that feelings are an illusion built by those same principles, by the idea of fear and insecurity. The only reason we don't try things in life is just because we're afraid of what we don't know. And once you kind of have that new perspective on the world, you can kind of bend those insecurities and those fears and those pains into any direction that you want. Because again, the mind is an illusion as well in some respects. And we see that in the film through that metaphor of kind of being able to download all of these different abilities. So, like, of course, the ability to defy gravity and to have all these amazing martial arts abilities. So now they wield the power to kind of take down the oppositional forces. And the oppositional force in this film is Agent Smith, played by Hugo Weaving. And, he is dressed like a corporate drone because the Wachowskis are anything but subtle. That is not something that they're known for, is subtlety. But Agent Smith is that program that keeps everybody in line, that keeps the Matrix consistent. And he's fine, as a villain. He does the job of like that typical antagonist. But for me, the real antagonist, the one that I like much more, is Cipher. And I don't understand why people don't talk about him more. I love him. I mean, first of all, Joe Pantoliano, who plays Cipher, he's just a wonderful actor. I love him in so many things, especially as Ralph Cifaretto in The Sopranos. That's probably his most famous role. He's just great at playing slimy, kind of untrustworthy characters. And without the character of Cipher in The Matrix, I don't think that this film would actually work for me. Because he's basically a representation of Judas in the Bible, because he betrays Morpheus. And I feel like the inclusion of that character is key. Because, when you have a group of people, a small group of people trying to lead a revolution, lead a cause that they believe in, there's always going to be one person that has second thoughts about it. And he represents that temptation to take the easy way out and live in that illusion that the Matrix provides. And that can be very intoxicating, the idea of ignorance is bliss rather than living with the truth. I think he really gets Neo and Trinity to question, do you really believe in what you're doing? Do you want to do this? And I think that's important for Neo because he's not particularly an interesting character. He needs all of these other characters around him to kind of project ideas onto him. But, honestly, I don't think that it's necessarily essential for his character to be some complex, deep Shakespearean character, because he, to me, is like a blank slate. He's that symbol of naivete that is molded by this environment, and he's influenced by all of these other allies and enemies. So when you have characters like Morpheus and Cipher and the Oracle kind of giving him this information and kind of allowing him to build his morals is very important, because when you live in the Matrix, I think that you're so brainwashed by your society that you really don't have a personality. And I like that. I like all of those different scenes, those quieter moments. And I think that the movie finds that perfect balance, because there's plenty of that. And of course, there is that action that you want to see, and that the action sequences are beautifully, beautifully done. And I think that's, a lot better than like the sequels, because those to me sold out completely, and they were much more heavy-handed in terms of the bang, the action. But I actually think that the film could have stand to kind of push further and be even more creative. I think it could take the risks and stray more from that formula, because it's certainly bold enough. The third act does fizzle a little bit. I mean, I'm not bored by it. It's certainly very exciting. And it sort of just resorts to gimmicks in order to kind of tie everything up. And a huge one for me was the romance between Trinity and Neo. I never understood that, because first of all, there's no chemistry there at all. And I just feel like it was very forced, and just basically she is that emotional catalyst for him to be resurrected, but there's no emotional arc there for there to be a payoff. And there are other kind of forced plot devices here and there, but that one in particular really bothers me. So I love the fact that this film is a lot like Ghost in the Shell, but to me it just doesn't take the risks that you see in anime, and I kind of wish that it did. But that being said, this is an action-adventure sci-fi film. It's not 2001: A Space Odyssey, it's not Enter the Void, it's not trying to be something you know, very experimental and different. It is what it is, and it achieves it very, very well, and it really does put a spin on that same generic formula that we've seen so many times. And there's a reason why so many of the action sequences are so famous, so many of the lines and the imagery, because it's a pretty well done movie, and it's still hugely influential 17 years later. So if you haven't seen it, which, I mean, I don't know who in the world hasn't, but if you haven't, check it out. It's a fun ride. And that is my review. Thank you all for listening. If you'd like to follow me on Twitter, the link is below. And you can also like my Facebook page and the link below that. Catch you next time.